Hey everyone, welcome to Pilot to Co-Pilot, a leadership podcast with me, Antonio Nev, and Jason Lindstrom. Now today we're talking about what happens when life gets hard or heavy all at once. Not necessarily devastating. Sometimes life is technically good. Career is moving, family is healthy, opportunities are there, but it's still a lot. The calendar is full, responsibilities stack up, and somewhere along the way you realize you haven't really come up for air. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how to stay grounded, avoid overwhelm, and still find joy and presence during full seasons of life. So let's get into it. Actually, Jason, as I read that introduction, I'm curious, can you think of any seasons of your life that felt like that? Well, listen, they can be hard, right? You can be going through something hard, the loss of a parent or changes in just life, but also it could just be your schedule is crazy with work and responsibilities. Any seasons that you can think about that remind you of those?
Yeah, it's probably why we haven't done a podcast lately, because the first part of this year is so busy. Just getting started with the new year and the routine of, starting over essentially. In the credit union business, our financials kind of start over at the beginning of the year. We're on a new budget season. You're on all those things. And, you have the turmoil in the economy, the turmoil with the war that's going on. You have inflation, a number of things that start to happen. And above all that, there's conferences and there's all kinds of stuff going on at the beginning of the year. It just seems like it's really front loaded. And I think the biggest thing to stay grounded in all of that is to have a plan and have a focus. Maintain that calendar. If you have to cancel a meeting or not go to something, and you can afford to miss it, then I think that's possibly, what you can do. But it's, it's tough. And I just coming out of that heavy season, I think my annual meeting is in March. I have a government affairs conference. There's so many things that go on, in credit union land in the first part of the year. And so it can be challenging. So yeah, I'm hear you full on.
Yeah, and especially, listen, we have young kids at home now, and it's not only my responsibilities and the traveling, and of course my wife and all of their responsibilities. For me, I'm finding that in seasons like this, to stay grounded, I have to intentionally press pause every now and then and give myself time to actually process what's going on. I may have said it before on this podcast, but I write about this often and talk about it on stage, Jason. But I believe so many of us, especially during full seasons, we get emotionally constipated. And what I mean by that is we get a backlog of emotions that we don't let out because we're going, going, going. And when I say emotions, it could be good stuff. Like there could be some wins and successes that we've had that we just haven't hit pause to celebrate, to acknowledge, because we're on to the next thing. There could be some sadness around certain things that we haven't processed. There could be anger, joy, all these different things. And I can tell you one thing, I find that when I hit pause, and maybe now that I think about you, maybe this happens for you on bike rides. When I hit pause and I go for that walk in nature, specifically without headphones, without dings on my wrist, without listening to podcasts, and I just hear that space is like a dishwasher overnight, cleaning everything and getting everything crisp and clean, ready to go. So for you, do you find you intentionally schedule pauses or bike rides like that for you?
Yeah, I think for me, bike riding is such a part of my life that if I miss one, I'm sore the next day because my body is so in tune to it. And so I think it's tough. You do have to hit those pauses, but you're so right about having an outlet. I think a lot of leaders sometimes get stuck in that routine, and then they finally just end up exploding or something goes on because they don't have the ability to pause or they're not taking the time or the ability to pause. And so I feel like, having those pauses that you talk about is very important to staying grounded, but also get out of the day to day and all of the things that are going on, the schedules, the busyness factor. We talked, I think, on the last podcast about PTO, taking the time off to do PTO, and Um, you talk about emotions. I was on a 2 week safari in South Africa, and wow, all of that was fantastic. And you come back and you have to like replug into everything. I'm not out chasing elephants and zebras on the savannah or whatever you call it now, but I'm back at work chasing elephants and zebras, right? And so I think it's one of those things where you do have to hit pause. You have to take that PTO time, but also like when you're in the thick of it, to be able to break away, like you say, like when you work out, no dings on your watch, no podcast, stuff like that. Just getting out, and for me, I can ride 10 miles outdoors, 18 miles outdoors, whatever. But even if I'm tired, I could do 5, 7 miles on the Peloton at night after work. And it just breaks me away from all that's going on.
Now, as you say that, and I didn't plan on talking about this, and maybe it's more appropriate for later in the podcast, but I think this is a good topic right now, especially during hard, challenging seasons. At some point I realized, it's been a challenging past couple of years for me. We talked about this on the podcast and losing our home and the wildfires out here in California. But what's fascinating is that I realized something that became obvious for me, Jason, beyond work, kids, family, all amazing things. I wasn't having a lot of fun. I didn't have that hobby, if you will,
Yeah.
to get away to recharge. And so I'm curious for you, if you look at bike riding, of course, there's an amazing physical aspect and element of it. My hunch is that you would consider it a hobby, and it's also fun. And in my coaching that I do one-on-one with people, a question I regularly ask people is, what are you doing for fun these days? And when I tell you, Jason, they don't have answers for that, beyond watching their series after the kids go to bed at 9 p.m., they put on an episode of Peaky Blinders or something.
Right.
Speaking about myself right now, they're not having fun. And it's funny. The office I work at in LA is not far from a movie theater. And you know what I want to do sometimes? I want to go in the middle of the day and go watch a 90-minute movie or 2-hour movie. But very rarely do I do that because guess what word comes up? Guilt. Right?
Yeah.
We feel like we always need to be doing something. So I'm curious, even if not just with you, when you think about leaders you've come across internally within your work or even your peers, when you go to these events, are people having fun, Jason? Or does the guilt stack up for them? They don't allow themselves to do that.
I think there's a lot of fun that goes on at some of these events. Sometimes too much fun. With the
Because we're catching up at the events. We finally go to the conference. You get away for 3 days, but we got to find a way to do it in our day-to-day life too, beyond just when we get on a plane.
Right. And I think that's a really good quality of a leader, right? It is that ability to break away and have fun, but you also want to make things fun in the workplace. And so, I think we do a number of things at our organization to create fun. And, and I think people can have hobbies that are fun, even, you got somebody that likes to crochet and make blankets or, scarves or whatever it might be. And that's their outlet. They don't have to get out and ride 10 miles to have fun. They can do that. And so I think you're right in so many aspects. Even if it's just, watching your TV show and all that, but, you really need to have that process as any employee, not even just a leader, just to be able to have fun, not only like within the work environment. And I know things can get tedious. The job can get monotonous. And I think that goes back to a lot of things I always say, which is always raise your hand and ask to take on more. Because some of those things that you might take on more might bring you some fun and some joy that breaks the monotony of your day-to-day work job, right? And what you're doing. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. And, having fun and creating that fun environment. I know we've got people that, love to listen to music. They like to go to concerts and they like to dance or they like to do whatever. And that's the outlet that they have. And I think it's fantastic that, people develop that. What gets troubling is when someone doesn't have fun, when they don't have fun in the workplace or they don't have fun in their own, family life and what's going on in the day-to-day, or it might be heavy at home. They may be, struggling to make ends meet. That's when it gets tough. And that's when you also have to like pull away. And there's a lot of things you can do for fun that are free. You don't need a very expensive mountain bike. You can go on a hike, especially here in Maine. you go on a nice hike and all you need is a good pair of shoes, really. And, get out one with nature, go down to the beach, just even have a, seat on a bench by the ocean and listen to the waves for half an hour. That could be enough fun that just gets you out of that overload of work and the schedule and the daily monotony that you feel.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said things that are free because one thing we're not suggesting, one thing I'm not suggesting is you got to spend money. You got to get on a
Yeah.
plane. You got to do these things, especially right now as plane ticket prices are jumping like crazy. But within your community, whether it's a large community or small community, there's something we can do to have some fun. The big thing is being willing to do it and willing to schedule it and put it on the calendar. I think in busy seasons, again, whether they're just full ones because of responsibilities, young kids or jobs or promotions, those things, or hard ones when you're really, really going through something. I know we've all experienced both of those. What would you suggest folks do to avoid living in reaction mode? And I think about reaction mode because we find ourselves in kind of fight or flight. And I'll tell you one thing I do to try to catch myself from constantly being in reaction mode is you're familiar with the 1 day method and the 1 day method planner. The question I ask at the top of that bad boy is what will make today a success? And
Right.
the way I'm even starting to evolve the language now as I'm doing workshops is what will make today matter. And I find what's interesting, Jason, is that if I ask myself that question with my planner open or my schedule, what will make today a success or what will make today matter? If I answer that before I open email and look at messages and social media, it keeps me driven. It keeps me focused on what matters. It kind of puts blinders on, if you will. Think about horses who have the blinders on because I identified what's most important instead of just letting the emails that come in decide which direction my day is going to go. Don't get me wrong. There are fires and urgent things that we have to tackle, but I find most people don't identify what's going to make their day success. What is when you, especially at the top of an organization, when there are a lot of fires, I'm sure maybe not a lot of fires, but just a lot of needs and responsibilities coming in. What do you do to avoid being in reaction mode?
Yeah, I think, I'm a big planner, so I'm always looking ahead, a couple steps ahead. Um, and I think that's why we're successful as an organization is we try to be proactive versus reactive. And I think in your daily life, for any level, I think that really helps to be proactive and have a plan every day. Like you said, your 1 day method is great, great book, great layout for how to live your life on a daily basis. And, let's say you're a call center rep and you have a goal of, less than 30 seconds wait time, challenge yourself. Like, let's beat that. And, that can be your goal for the day. Like, hey, I want to make sure I have nobody waiting on hold that long. Or, if you have a wait time, a call that, you want to keep under 2 minutes, all those metrics are available. And so, you can have fun by challenging yourself, even as a call center rep, to try to go through the process of how am I going to meet my goal today. And I think, in our business in the credit union world, so much hinges on who's walking in the door that day and what are their needs. And so I think from a frontline perspective, yeah, you're cashing checks or you're depositing checks and you're getting loans and all that. But everybody that you come in top contact with has their own story. And I think there's some value to that is, approaching each interaction with some fun level and being able to talk to people and be sure that, you're getting the products and services that we offer out to them, but also listening to their story and just engaging with humanity, I think helps with that process. And so, at the end of the day, I think I'm successful if I can leave on time. And there are times when I'm successful and I leave on time and on my way home, something else happens, right? And so I'm jumping back on my laptop at 6 or 7 o'clock at night to go back through something else, or on my phone to send an email back to somebody about something. Um, and then there's also like volunteerism stuff that you can do after the fact if you want to be able to continue the role and help out others. And so I do a lot of that as well. But I think it's really just having that plan for yourself to, A, have fun, engage with humanity, B, and just be engaged with the process. And like I said, you can take any job and have fun in it and build the goals to accomplish each day. And then, if something's going on in the home life, then, maybe that's your goal. It's like, hey, I'm going to get through work from today, and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to talk to my kids about X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And I think that helps too, knowing that you have a plan. Like, this is what I'm going to do when I get home today.
Yeah, having a plan. Now, I think a lot of people don't have a plan. They're just being reactionary, and I
Yeah.
get it. And the problem nowadays, or the challenge nowadays, is that again, we have so many things coming at us. We have so many distractions, right? Whereas I was laughing with someone recently, and I said, "Man, I'm so happy that I know what it's like to have to wait a week to watch my favorite show." The fact that everything's immediately available to us, whether it be through social media, you can watch 10 episodes of a series, back to back to back. I'm so glad that the delayed gratification thing. I think you hit on something interesting though. And that is that what I'm hearing you say, Jason, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we got to make a choice. And I think there are three things always in our control, right? Our attitude, the effort we give, and the actions that we take. And I think it's interesting. We think about actions and effort, but one thing that's huge is attitude. What kind of mood are we going to show up with? How are we going to show up? And when I think about attitude, that's a choice. But also, I think a lot of people, and sometimes I have to remind myself of this, we need to recommit. We talk about commitment so much, but we need to recommit to those things that are so important. I get it. Guess what? Not everyone loves their job. I mean, that we're just telling the truth. Not everyone absolutely loves their job. However, if they are willing to look at that job and what it offers, whether it's the pay, whether it's the benefits, whether it's the relationships, all those things it gives us, that job that someone may dislike, if you look at it with the right attitude, it could be something you're so incredibly thankful for. But again, you got to come at it with the right lens. So I think a lot of us, and I'm reminding myself right now, that we got to make a choice to control what we can control. And one of those things is our attitude. And I can tell you from so many conversations with you, whether it be on this podcast, but also in real life, I've never heard you talk from a place of victimhood. It's always from an empowering perspective, controlling what you can control, being a problem solver, creative thinker. Is that something, if I met you 20 years ago, were you that guy back then as well? Or is this something that you've developed over the course of your life and career?
No, I've always been very compartmentalized, I guess, where I can compartmentalize things in my head to say, okay, I might have this going on at home, but when I show up at work, I'm going to be, the good guy here. And I think it's a really tough skill for some folks to grasp and understand how that works. And for me, I don't know if it was just my upbringing. I was, kind of brought up in a strict family household. My dad is Swedish, and really had like, hey, when you're 18, you're on your own. And so I turned 18 and I had no candles on my birthday cake because I was done. I was an adult. And he said, you can live here for the summer and earn money to go to college. By the way, I paid for myself. And
As a teller?
right, right, exactly. As a teller at college. And so it was one of those things that, I had to compartmentalize the feelings that I had with what was going on in the family life and really focus on earning enough money to go to college. And I had to drop out of college. It took me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree. And so, yes, I've had those trials and tribulations, but I think what I learned through all of that process was the ability to compartmentalize, the ability to show up at work, the ability to look at work as, hey, I'm going to spend 8 hours plus of my day, 5 days a week, more time spent there with family, essentially. I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make it so that I enjoy what I do. I'm going to learn all that I can while I'm there. And then again, I'm going to raise my hand and take on more. And I think that's what's led me to the CEO chair, right? Is having those kind of focuses, and not be the victim. I can look back at my college experience and say, gosh, it took me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree. And hey, guess what? I'm not a doctor. I'm not, a surgeon like My wife just had ACL surgery, and I think like the skill that it takes to do that is crazy. But yeah, those were trials and tribulations back in the past, but I'm able to compartmentalize that, and that's what's built my character as a hardworking individual, but also somebody that wants to have fun and know that, there are people out there that get a full ride college paid for by their parents and they graduate in 4 years. But do they appreciate that experience? And so I think along the way, I've appreciated all of my experiences. From the moment that I was a teller and was robbed at gunpoint, I can appreciate that experience and translate that to the tellers that work for me today. That I know when they go in to their job every day, they have a fear that that could happen to them. And so I can use that experience that I had years ago to help put them at ease. Like, hey, as a leader, I've been there too. I've been in your shoes. And I think the more that we can do that in society, at a workplace, just in general, put yourself in someone's shoes. You see a homeless person on the corner, begging for their last dollar or whatever that they need just to eat a meal. And it's like, I've never been that way. I've never had to put myself in that person's shoes. And I can only imagine how hard that is, what a hard life that is on a regular basis, that you're standing out here in Portland, Maine. Sometimes in the winter, it's cold out and you just have the clothes on your back, and that's what your job is to beg for food. And so I think there's a lot to that, to look at things and be able to compartmentalize things. And sure, there's been stuff in my life that I've had, and I actually had a manager, executive vice president, tell me at one time, is like, I had no idea that was going on in your personal life. I'm like, yeah, you don't, because I compartmentalize and I show up to work ready to go. And what do you need me to do? And I think that plays a big role for all levels in the workplace, but also like the home life too. It's like, you got to show up, and you got to be able to compartmentalize and do the different things, whether it's, biking after work, and then, or I'm going to a meeting where I'm a volunteer board member and I've got to be in a meeting for 2 hours after work. And so, I think all of that just kind of makes it one of those things where, if you can do that and you can compartmentalize through everything, it really works out.
Yeah, as you're talking, first I'm blown away. I'm reminded, Jason, that the internet tells a story, but it can never tell the whole story. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
few things just right now I learned about you I didn't know. I didn't know you were robbed once at the teller by a gun. I didn't know that the 10-year journey to get that degree. And then the one that really, really sticks out, by the way, we're gonna be right. We're writing you a book, man, because you got a story. I'm just imagining, I'm just envisioning your father telling you, you're 18 now, no candles on the cake. You can stay here for the summer. You gotta, like, things. You talk about generational divides. That
Yeah.
sounds like my dad. Things that certain generations now, I'm not saying it's better or worse, but kids, we may not ever understand or appreciate when you have kids post college graduation moving back in with their parents. And don't get me wrong, I'm the kind of parent that I want to support my kids the best I can. If that's them, I'm not going to kick them out living at home. I'm going to do that 100%. And I get that our parents' generation, that they were different, built from a different cloth, not necessarily right or wrong, but just fascinating you sharing that, and makes me think about generational differences. But also, I'll share something funny I think you'll appreciate about how we can compartmentalize. And I don't know if this is a Tony thing, a guy thing, or just a human thing. I was in the grocery store not long ago, and I was having a tough day. I'll be honest with you. And I'll tell you this, man. Grocery stores, they play the wrong music that can hit you emotionally sometimes. And some song came on at the wrong time, and I said, I'm walking around the grocery store with eggs and things, and I'm like, wait a second, am I about to cry in a grocery store? Is this really about to happen? Am I going to see some fellow parents from our kids' school? And I swear, right when the tears were about to come down, Jason, I walked by the aisle that had aftershave, and my brain was like, oh, you need aftershave. And all of this, all the emotions went away because my brain went into, oh, you have something you need to do. I think about how I can show up, and yeah, there's emotion, but I also can right away zip in and get focused if need to be on the task at hand. And found it so funny how I was about to cry. Then I realized, oh, you need aftershave. It's right down this aisle, and everything was cool. You ever
Yeah.
experienced something like that?
Yeah. I just was mountain biking in Bentonville, Arkansas, which you think if you're not a mountain biker, you don't realize that this place is the mountain bike mecca of the world, essentially. Sam Walton and his family have put so much money in that community to make it a bike-friendly community, and so there's like a main drag that you can ride down, and then all these offshoots to trails. And so I get up to this one area called the castle, right? And it's this like rocky outcropping thing that's been built. And it's got beginner trails that go off, intermediate trails that go off, and then more advanced trails that go off. And it gets steeper with each thing, like the drop off into the trail, which was like a flowy, kind of curvy trail, pretty flat on the beginner side. And the intermediate side, a little bit steeper. So I roll my bike up to the edge and I like look over and I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. And so a couple of my buddies were there with me and they're like, are you gonna go? I'm like, yeah, and I just went for it. And just up off this like drop in, and it was a blast. But it was one of those moments where it was like I went over that little hill thing and I'm like, what did I get myself into? I have to concentrate. There's jumps ahead, like all of this. And I had never been on this trail, and one of the like tenets of mountain biking is that you want to like take it easy going through a trail the first time, and you want to scope it out. You want to know where things are because rocky outcroppings happen or a drop happens, and it was a fascinating experience because everything like tunnel vision closed in, and all I was looking at is the trail and like what's ahead of me. And so, I think when you talk about compartmentalizing and you had the aftershave effect where it's like, hey, that hit you and like stopped everything, but you knew that's what you needed to do. And it was like the same thing for me, but just a different level of like, hey, I'm gonna go down this rollover into this trail and I'm committed. You don't stop. Like you go.
You don't
And
stop. You go. You know what's fascinating about that is, as you just described that. First, I'm doing that with you next year. But it makes me think about brain science, neuroscience. And people say as we get older, they say, it feels like time is going by faster.
yeah.
And there's a reason why time is going by faster. At least it feels like it's going faster for us, say, as opposed to kids or when we were kids. It's because it goes by fast because of the routine,
Yeah.
because we're doing the same thing every single day. And they say if you do want to slow things down, it's by experiencing new things. So, for example, you do an experience like that, slows time down because it's brand new. Your brain is processing that. Me doing some travels I did with our family last year in different countries, it slowed things down. I had the longest June I've ever had in my life last year because, in a good way, because it was all brand new. It wasn't the day to day the same thing. I'm not saying folks need to go abroad or again go to Arkansas to mountain bike, but there are things within our communities that we can do that are different, whether that's a new fitness class, whether that's trying something new, a new restaurant, going to an event, local theater production that we normally wouldn't consider going, but why not? Because it keeps us young and it keeps us present. Let's get practical for a second as we get ready to land the plane here. Are there any routines or small habits that you use when life gets full? And I'll just share a couple here that have worked for me. Like, and I think we already discussed this one, but I can tell you right now, in full seasons, if I'm not sweating, I'm gonna go crazy. Like me having an outlet to increase my heart rate, to sweat, to get some of those endorphins are pretty much non-negotiable. And sometimes, even though I don't want to do it, I got to do it. And some days it's just a 30-minute walk, but you got to move. But something else that makes all the difference for me is connecting with others. And I'm not talking about connecting via text message, but I'm talking about actually hearing someone's voice in real time. They can make all the difference in the world, even if it's just a 5-minute conversation in person or over the phone. So those are two things that make a difference for me because I can isolate sometimes during challenging times. So sweating, but also connecting with others. How about you? Any habits or things you need to intentionally do during challenging seasons?
Well, I'll back up to what you were saying right there is that our relationship as friends and everything, I know you work out and you do all that. And sometimes you'll call me from the treadmill, but you'll leave me a voice message on text. And I've never had anybody else do that. And I just find it so cool in a lot of ways because I'm not hearing your words through reading them. I'm actually hearing them. And so that personal connection that you're talking about is so fantastic. And you do practice that so well. Um, and I'm always so awkward trying to reply, right? Because I've got to like speak and I'm normally used to texting. And so I have to speak and give you a message back. And, that drives me to do something different and get out of my comfort zone, which I thoroughly enjoy it. And I'm starting to think about like, maybe I need to start doing that with more of my friends as well.
Let
Right.
me tell you this, like, even though like last week we shared quite a few text voice messages together, and a lot of people think I'm a weirdo because I leave voice notes, and it's because my dear friend Drew started it. But I'll tell you, even though you and it was, I guess we can call it asynchronous, right?
Yeah.
Even though you and I didn't talk in real time, it felt like we had a conversation. It was full, and we're not, and I don't, it's real because a text message, our thumbs get tired. We're going to say as little as possible. But we went back and forth, and literally it felt like a conversation. You got to express some things, I got to express some things, and it's so helpful. And that's a connection for me, even though it wasn't in real time. So I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah. And I think, we could challenge our listeners to do that. Just do it one time with somebody you know. Send one of those voice messages through text and see how that person responds. And if they respond back in like, what the heck are you doing, man? Just in a text, or do they give you a message back and see how that is? It's that human connection just really matters, I think. And, that's just one thing. Trying to think of other things I do. Definitely the workout factor, losing a lot of weight, helping beat type 2 diabetes. I just have to keep up with it. And like as I said earlier, if I don't ride, I'm like more sore from not riding because I think my body has adjusted to it because I've done this now for since 2021. So we're looking at 5 years of like straight riding as much as I possibly can. And there are times when I need a day off or whatever, but I'll do like a stretching class or something else to like continue to get my rings and be sure that I'm maximizing everything. And I think that drives me on the personal side. The professional side, it's just trying to stick with everything that I'm doing. I don't give up on things. If I have a term limit in a board that I'm serving on, that's not an anniversary date that I want to have happen. I want to continue beyond that. And so I don't look at setting a goal like, oh, I'm going to do this for 3 years because the term is 3 years. I'm going to do it day by day and I'm going to just take it and I'm going to continue to plan. I'm going to see how I can help out another organization. And when it ends at the end of 3 years or 6 years or whatever the term is, if I can still volunteer and be involved in whatever organization, it's great. But so I think there's a couple things there that, definitely the fitness aspect, the voice text thing is cool.
And you didn't say this, but I think this is probably one for all of us that comes in handy. I'll tell you one thing, having something on your calendar to look forward to makes all the difference. And it doesn't need to be something big, but just something on there you're looking forward to, whether it's the weekend, whether it's a class you're going to, a movie you're going to see, a show, uh, game night you host at home for a few
Yeah.
friends. Like, I don't think we have enough stuff on our calendar we actually look forward to. Let's land the plane with this one right here. And I'm curious. We talk so much about gratitude, and I think during tough seasons, one thing people really lean on is gratitude. And this may be controversial. I'm starting to look at gratitude very much a different way because if you're in a tough season and you say I have so much gratitude, I'm so thankful for my health, but you're waking up with panic attacks or your voice is labored, that gratitude, what does it do for you? If you're thankful for your job, but say it's a really tough season at work, like what does that do for you? And I'll tell you what I've been doing is, and I appreciate gratitude and I love the research on it. But this comes about with the 1 day method as well. Instead of focusing on gratitude, what I do at the end of the day, Jason, I don't write down three things I have gratitude for. I write down 3 wins
Mm.
instead. I think they're very close, gratitude and wins, but wins are tangible. So instead of saying I'm grateful for my health, I'll say, man, a win today was that 30-minute walk that I got. Huge, right? That's a win. Uh, a win today was 5 outreach. I did outreach to 5 different people. Not I'm grateful for my job. I'm grateful for my work. A win today for me was I reached out to 5 separate people for biz dev. You know, a win is that the conversation I've been avoiding that I finally had progress on a proposal. How do you look at gratitude and wins, or do you track your days?
Yeah, I think very similarly to what you're saying is that the little things are big wins. If I can get out of the office on time and get home and help my wife make dinner or something like that, that's a win. Where neither one of us have some volunteer thing that we're doing that night. She's laid up at home, and I have to be a nurse, and I'm not a nurse. I do not like it at all whatsoever. And she said, "I'm doing an excellent job." I'm like, "Really? Are you serious? Okay." So that's gratitude for me, right? It's like, okay, well, I don't like being a nurse, but she just gave me a good kudos that I'm doing a good job. And I think that matters. It matters as a leader, just going around and telling people doing a good job, or send them an email or voice text. I wonder how that would fly if I voice texted people at work, saying, "Hey, you did a great job." And so I think there's a lot to that. Too. And the gratitude piece is very important. I think it's gratitude to hear it, but also to give it. You know?
100%. Well, I think this has been a great conversation. I think our
Yes.
listeners are gonna get a lot of value out of it. And hey, find us on the internet. We're easy to find. We'd love to hear from you about what you do when life gets hard or it's heavy all at once. We'd love to hear from you. We thank you so much for joining another episode of Pilot to Co-Pilot with me, Antonio Neves, and my friend Jason Lindstrom. And we look forward to seeing you back here very soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Antonio.